In today's video, we are going to talk about nurses taking drugs. Tune in. Welcome to the channel, everyone. My name's Fola, and here on Deep Mind Square, we talk all things bridging mental wellness and spirituality for nurses. Today's video, I really felt the call to speak some of my truth around nurses taking drugs. What does this look like? And how can we start to step forward into our profession as nurses, really embracing the concept of removing any stigma around substances and addictions and having a really truly harm reductionist standpoint. Before we get into all that, I invite you to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you're updated on future video releases. This channel is really about supporting nurses who might be turning to alternative ways of healing, going through their own recovery process around spiritual emergence, physical and mental emotional challenges, and really just stepping more into our personal power. I myself am a psychiatric nurse turned shamanic practitioner and Reiki master teacher, and I feel really called to continue to enlighten the world around what psychedelics are, how they can support people, all these different forms of plant medicine that I think really can be quite beneficial for us as we move into really expansive understandings of our consciousness. And this is the future of our world, our society. I mean, we see psychedelics becoming bigger and bigger every day. And yet, even within the regulatory bodies of nurses, talking about these things are kind of seen with like this hush-hush attitude, and other regulatory bodies as well, like psychology and all that. But I think that needs to stop. For so long, I've lived my life trying to mask, I guess, who I am, what my interests are, how I show up in the world, and I'm sure you can relate to this. I think we're so told in our society to stay within these boxes. And part of my job for many years was working alongside the police. And this is where I found it was really quite a challenge because my interest and where my focus was around psychedelics. I would read about research and take courses, and I saw how beneficial it was in the present moment and even in the past, talking about the 60s and LSD and all this stuff. And yet I found myself in this place working with a very box sort of organization. And it was just so funny, the irony, I guess you could say, around when we show up in certain areas and our internal beliefs, if they don't align, we really can start to feel this pushback. So I ended up leaving that profession, recognizing that maybe this isn't really the place for me, but so great to be able to work within those organizations and to learn kind of the way that people process and, the organization itself, how it's layered and how things happen or don't happen. And it was really quite eye-opening for me. But the more I step into my authenticity, really lining up with my true path, the more I see that there is a need to speak about these things. So we know that nurses are using drugs. They're using alcohol, tobacco, smoking. They might be turning to cannabis. And I know there's many out there who are using mushrooms, psychedelics, other forms of plant medicines to promote their own healing, whether it's in their own kind of solo journeys or also in ceremonial, ritual, and spiritual communities. We have to remember that in other indigenous groups and other cultures, these forms of plant medicine journeys are basically the norm. They're rites of passage. They'd be seen as a way to move and progress through life and to enter into new chapters. And in our Western society, we don't have these rites of passage. I always tell people it's the only rite of passage we really have is you turn 18, you go get drunk in a bar, or whatever your legal age is in your province or your state. And it's that's not a whole lot of rite of passage. That's not really diving into the process of, hey, look where I've been and where I'd like to go. And this is what I feel psychedelics or plant medicines can support people with. So the rates of nurses turning to substances and actually showing up with substance use disorder is 21%. I think it's the same as within the normal Canadian population, but that is a pretty high number considering how few nurses there are compared to the general population of the country. So what are some of the symptoms of substance use disorder? Really, we know this is about people who might be turning to substances in excessive amounts. There might be the feeling of the need to binge. taking more than usual, having periods of blackouts or not recalling things during the use, having multiple periods per week of use, and then not being able to necessarily function or go to work and do the life things that are kind of expected of each of us. There might also be some other risky behaviors. People are spending a lot of money. They might be driving under the influence. Obviously, as nurses, working under the influence is probably not a good idea. And it seems like the attempts to try and reduce the use of any substance just keeps not happening. And that leads to this continual cycle and this guilt sometimes for folks. Another thing here is that when people do try to stop, there might be a withdrawal of, that substance within them. And that can be really uncomfortable, especially with certain substances like alcohol. So we know that psychedelics, plant medicines, have been known to support people with substance use. I'm not going to go into all that research, but for instance, ibogaine is being used to support folks with opioid addiction. And yet accessing that here in our country is not really that well known. So it's like, how do we promote wellness in nurses who are having to take care of people, but are struggling through their own mental health and their own addictions? As nurses, oftentimes what happens compared to other regulatory bodies or employers, you might get caught for using substances and the employer will be like, oh yeah, okay, here, let's get you some treatment. But for nurses, we go through disciplinary action and the regulatory bodies will make it known that you did bad, which to me makes absolutely zero sense when we talk about harm reduction, which is all about what nurses are and reducing stigma. What the fuck is that hypocrisy right there? You can see this approach to drugs, to addictions, to people moving through the issues that they're moving through. Within our nursing regulatory bodies, in my opinion, it's actually really demonized and not looked at in a positive light. So how then are we supporting our nurses? I know for myself, I can say, and hearing stories from others, that after that long day of working and supporting people, there was a period in my life where I would come home and I'd have 1 to 2 glasses of wine every day. Honestly, and I remember thinking at one point, what am I doing? This is totally not me. I am not usually a drinker, anything like that. Feel like I'm very intentional and aware of the set and setting, places that I'm being in before I indulge in something. But I remember catching myself, and it was because I felt so burnt out and overwhelmed. And I had to really set some new limits for myself of, okay, what are some healthier ways that I can go through coping with this? And I acknowledge that this might not be the case for everyone. And this is something that I've been trying to move through at this point in my life around speaking up about psychedelics, about plants. I am not creating this channel as a way to sell drugs and do all these things that are obviously illegal, but I'm hoping to decrease the stigma and build an awareness around psychedelics and plant medicines and other forms of altered states that can support each of us nurses in healing our internal world, which ultimately will then mirror out into the external world. So I am at this place right now where I feel I have to really balance and how do I want to show up? I don't want to get in trouble because I am a registered nurse talking about these things. And yet at the same time, I feel that now more than ever, this is needed. How many nurses are dying by overdoses on drugs or by suicide? And this needs to stop. We are so much more worthy than the shit that we've been going through and we've been allowing. And our leadership, our organizations that say they're there to support and care for us need to start listening more, need to start looking at the research and stop this top-down approach of controlling really women, and even if you're a man within nursing, I truly do feel that the nursing role is a feminine role. It's about caring and nurturing. And men can do this. Those male nurses are tapping into that feminine energy. But when we talk about these structures of the triangle sort of pyramid structure of a regulatory body, have this top down with the union, it's top down, and the frontline staff are at the bottom. This is a very patriarchal, masculine sort of phallic shape. And it's like, that's not going to work anymore. We as nurses need to band together, create that circle, create that community, and support one another so that we aren't turning to unhealthy ways of coping with our lives. And within the plant medicine, psychedelic space, these things can really support in healing, but they're not for everyone. You know, this isn't about, hey, everyone go do magic mushrooms. It's like, no, you need to speak with your health professionals, people under your like umbrella of your care team, whoever that might be, and make an informed choice for you. Maybe that is microdosing. Maybe it's turning to some type of ayahuasca journey within the right context and space. Or maybe it's you doing other forms of healing. All these things are valid. It's important, though, that we recognize that there are high rates of unhealthy coping mechanisms for nurses, and we don't necessarily get the support we need. And I truly do feel that plant medicine, psychedelics, and these altered forms of accessing our consciousness and our unconsciousness and healing ourselves is going to be the thing that ultimately helps us to show up as better nurses and as better humans overall. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about this in the comments below. Feel free to share where you sit around this concept or this like thought of like, how can we embrace all that there is without any like condemnation of who we be? And if this is something you've struggled with, there are lots of great organizations out there, such as Open Nurses. They are an organization for nurses who are into entheogens and psychedelics based out of the States. They hold lots of great different like series of talks and have a great space on Facebook as well. And there's lots of different places you can connect with folks. I mean, it's funny, I find myself meeting more and more nurses who are like involved or interested in psychedelic spaces. And I really truly believe that like, because we are the caregiver, we are able to hold a very sacred space within psychedelic work. So whatever that looks like for you, feel free to like and share this video with anyone you think might be interested. And I look forward to seeing you all in another video. Take care.